Hello everyone, welcome to this week's video. I'm Honey, part of the team who make up Colouring Heaven. This week we have a fantastic tutorial for you. Our artist Jo will be teaching you how to colour tree bark. I'm sure you will love this one, as I know that bark can be a tricky one to nail with all the different textures. Don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Plus, stay tuned next week when we'll be bringing you a speed colour video so you can see how Jo coloured this entire colouring page. This design is from our Wildwood Witches issue, which you can get your hands on via the link in the description. But for now, let's get stuck into the video.
Today I will be demonstrating how to colour wood bark using colour pencils. I will be working with Prismacolor pencils. Now, when you are trying to draw something that exists in nature, it's really helpful to find examples that you can use as inspiration. My mum lives near some lovely old trees, so I went there and took lots of photos. However, if you don't have access to the example that you want, or it's pouring with rain, you can also search for images on the internet. There are several websites containing lots of copyright-free images which are safe to use without asking for permission or giving credit to the artist. The one that I used for this tutorial is called Unsplash. When you start to look at different sorts of tree bark, it's amazing how much variety there is. So this is a birch tree, which I recently found came in all sorts of different colours. Surprisingly rich, so this is a lovely brown shade, but it has these very distinctive horizontal white lines on it. This is a horse chestnut. So the bark on the horse chestnut is quite smooth, but it has these lovely whorls on it. Then this was a beech tree, which had this very, very strange fungus growing up one side. And again, the bark wasn't that rough, but it had these knobbles. This is a lime tree, which is a strange name for a tree that doesn't grow limes. I found out that it's also called a linden tree. This has got a pretty rough bark with lots of whorls on it. Nice jaggedy ones. And this is a close-up of another lime tree. Again, we're getting some really nice texture showing here on the bark, which is what we're looking for. I also looked at an oak tree, as I thought the throne was probably made of this ancient wood. I couldn't spot one, so I found some examples on Unsplash. As you can see from here, this one has got a very rough bark and it's pretty gnarled looking. So once we've looked at some examples, we need to go ahead and decide what sort of tree we're going to colour. The artist has given us some clues in the drawing. Their design contains several whorls. There we go, and a little one down there. And lots of lines denoting grooves. And a few broken parts as well. Jagged points. So I think that this is an old gnarled tree, so I'm going to use a combination of the images of the lime tree and the oak tree. Now what I usually do when I'm colouring a tree is I start by deciding whether I want to put any moss on it, because it's a good idea to mark those areas first so you don't accidentally colour over them. So I'm going to start by laying down the very lightest shade that I use for moss, which is a Chartreuse colour. And I'm going to put the moss, you can be fairly random about this. I'm just going to put one bit here. A nice big patch going around the edge of this whirl. And then I think I'm going to put another bit up here. Just going round here. Perhaps a little bit more down here. So we're going to leave that now and finish it off at the end. So the next thing we need to do is choose the colour palette that we're going to use for the tree. Now, as this is a winter scene, I decided that I was going to use greyer shades rather than bright browns. So my starting point here is different to in a lot of my drawings, because I'm going to start by using one of the darkest colours. Whereas usually I tend to work from light then going through to dark, but I use the dark firstly to put in all of the lines and grooves that I want to appear on the tree. Now you need to watch out when you're colouring this tree, because some of the marks that the artist has made in their design actually represent patches of snow and need to be left white. So that's one of the things that you need to be thinking about. Also, another issue is that on these parts where the branches have snapped off, the jagged parts, those will be the colour of the inside of the tree and not the bark. So we're going to start off by marking these in, and also what I am going to do on this tree, and you can do if you want to but don't feel that you have to, is that you can put in some extra grooves and you can use your photo references to decide where to put them. I'm particularly keen on accentuating the whirls because I like drawing whirls, and the lime tree image is good to help you with this. So I'm going to start off by marking in with a dark colour the grooves that the artist has already drawn. You don't have to be very careful about this, because later on we're going to do a bit more work on the grooves. So let's look at this whirl. So I'm actually going to accentuate this quite a lot more than the artist has done in their design. So I'm drawing on a lot more of these circular lines that go around the whirl. Now the bark around a whirl follows a particular pattern, which I'm now going to demonstrate on one that's further down the page. I'll just move the paper up a little bit. Here, so at the moment we haven't got a whirl at all, we've just got this little circular mark. So I'm going to make one. So you start off with circular lines like this, and then the lines of bark follow a pattern which goes like this. And then on the other side it follows the same pattern. You can kind of merge it in with the marks that the artist has done in their design. And then we just go into the normal patterns of the bark. If you look at the knots on a piece of wood, you can see the same marks very clearly. So I'm going to move back to the main part of the design. So I'm just carrying on putting in my extra lines. Moving up here, I think I'm going to put another little circle in there. There's the marks that go around it. So the lines that the artist has put on give you a nice starting point. Looks like there's quite a big crevice in the tree here where the branch joins, so I'm going to accentuate that by drawing lines all the way down here. Now the artist has put quite a pattern on here already, but I'm going to accentuate it. So this bit here is a patch of snow. So the pattern on this part of the branch is quite irregular. So I'm going to go around the edges. I don't think this bit is snow because it wouldn't be able to stay on the slope of that branch. It's going to be, the snow is going to be sitting on the tops like that. So let's put these lines in here. You don't have to have this part of the operation, you don't have to have your pencil particularly sharp, because we're going to go in and sharpen it up later. It doesn't need to be even either, because the light is going to be falling on the crevices and grooves on the tree and making irregular shadows. There we go. So I've drawn in all of those. I'm going to put in a few extra lines here as well. Go back to working on this section now. I'm going to lengthen these lines here, take them further down the tree like this. That one's going to go around there. I'm going to put one in here. Sometimes they go in a V shape like that, so I'm going to put one of those in. Put another little whirl in here. Again, using that shape. Make that line longer. Moving around there. Right, now I'm going to do a little bit more work on the top. I'll put another whirl in here. Again, with the lines then going round it. This I'm going to treat as a patch of snow, these bits here. Now with the jagged bit, that is going to have probably some vertical lines going down, because of, to denote the way that it's been snapped off. Follow the artist's line here. And then I think on this section, this bit of wood kind of looks quite rough, so I'm going to do a similar thing to what the artist has done here and just put in some irregular shapes. Moving down to some more vertical lines where it looks as if the tree has snapped. It actually, if you look, this looks like a monster's face. So there's the eye, and this jaggedy bit looks like their teeth. So by putting in some vertical lines, we're accentuating the tooth effect. So we're going to do a similar thing down here actually, because this is the bottom teeth of the monster. So we're putting in vertical lines, and again vertical lines around where the tree has snapped. There's a little blob there. I'm going to turn that into another whirl. I'm obsessed with them. There we go, and the usual shape. Vertical lines going down there. We've got a patch here. I'm not sure whether that's snow or not, but I'm going to put a line around it. Then sometimes there's a bigger crack on a tree, so I'm actually going to put quite a big crack there. Fill it in. Oh, I've missed this bit up here. So I'm going to assume, I think, that that bit and that bit is snow. So we just want to have a few lines going in. There we go. Now moving on to the lower part. So I'm putting in some quite long lines. You have to dot them as they go through these branches on the throne. And I think I'm going to bring them, the tree juts out, so I'm going to bring them round like this. You can really just play around with this. Just finish off this section. Again, this looks a little bit, I'm going to leave this bit because I think that it's probably going to have some reflected light on it, so I'm not going to colour that bit yet. So I'm just going to do this little section here, and again I'm going to do this one in quite a rough rather than straight lines. I'm going round in sort of circular patches, make it look a bit rougher. Then we've got a few more lines that will carry on through these branches, come out here. And you have to think about where the lines continue, follow it through the branches. Left a little bit of a gap here. Again, that one looks quite rough in here, so I'm just going to put a few rough lines in. Right, now at this point I'm going to stop putting the dark lines in, and the next step I do is then go over with a foundation of the lightest colour I'm going to use, which is 20% French grey. Now, as the tree has a rough texture that tends to run in vertical patterns, you can move your pencil in a less neat approach using zigzags or directional strokes, not small circles. And when you come to the whorls, you can carry on the pattern with your pencil strokes. Now you want to go over the darker lines, because the idea is what we're doing at this point is we're actually getting the dark lines to blend in a little bit, and then we're going to go back over them with a darker colour to accentuate the very centre of the crevice. So we just want to cover the whole area. Again, we'll leave the jagged part for later. Yeah, just go in rough zigzag lines. So you don't need to be too careful about it. Use fairly strong pressure because you want to get that darker colour blended in a little bit. Oh, there's a bit there that needs a little bit more dark. Oh, picked up the wrong one there. Here we go. Here we go. I'm just still leaving this patch here uncoloured because later on in the colouring I'm going to put some reflected light in there. Then we need to be careful going behind these branches. I've assumed that these are branches. I guess they could also be interpreted as antlers. Whichever you choose is fine. Now I just need to do the little branches. I'm going to put some dark lines on them. Yeah, you don't want your pencil too sharp for doing this bit, because we're trying to get an overall colouring, an overall covering. We're not trying to be too detailed at this point. Now I've spotted one patch that I was going to treat as snow, but it looks like I've coloured over. So I'm going to just lift the colour off using this battery eraser. In fact, it's a Derwent rechargeable eraser, which I find very good because it comes with this is the fine point. You can also get it with swap it in for a thicker point. But I like this because with the fine point, it's really good for putting in highlights, which is something I will be using it for later on. It is quite expensive, but it would make a really good Christmas or birthday present. There we go. Get that out of the way. And this is actually another piece of equipment that I'm using. It's a dusting brush, Faber-Castell dusting brush. It's very soft bristles and it's used for getting your rubber bits and pencil fragments off your drawing without smudging everything else. Now that's two colours we've used. The tree at the moment is looking very two-dimensional. So the next stage is to introduce some shading. And what we want to think about at this point is the direction of the light. Now the light is going to be coming from these candles, which I think will just be probably throwing their light over quite a limited area here. And then we've got the light of the moon that's just above the Winter Queen's head. So that's going to be throwing light out in these directions, which means that the darkest part of the tree is going to be here, the areas away from the light. This looks like quite a deep crevice, so it's going to be in here. And for the whorls, it's going to be on the sides that are away from the light. So here we go, I'm going to start shading. And what I'm using here is 70% French grey. So once again, you don't need to be too careful with the shading, because if you do a rough zigzaggy pattern, that's going to help create the texture of the tree. So we're doing darkest part here, then gradually lighten the pressure so that you get a gradient moving over into the lighter area. Again, all of this part's going to be dark. This is going to be dark. All the way around here. So again, I'm going to put a darker area in here. Then this dark area is going to swirl past the moss. Probably go around here like that as well. So you can create extra texture by leaving some areas a little bit lighter and then putting another darker streak in. So for example, I might do that here. Then I'm going to carry on this side. I don't want to leave it too light because really this whole branch is going to be pretty shaded. Around the far side of the whorl. Probably leave this bit here a bit lighter. So you get a real good feel for its roundness. These branches are going to be dark here. Just colour in there. I'm going to go right up to the moss. A bit more dark there. So this bit's going to be dark, but again leave that edge of the whorl, leave that a bit lighter. Again, so we get a feeling for its roundness. So this bit's all going to be dark, but this bit here, it's kind of bending. I think it's bending. If it was in 3 dimensions, I think this bit would be kind of coming out from the paper, which means that this section here is going to be catching light. So I'm going to leave that section a little bit lighter, just this bit here. Now we're moving up to this part. Again, this is all going to be in the shade. Again, that bit of whirl is going to be catching quite a lot of the light, so I'm not going to colour that very much. Oh, I've gone over a bit of snow there. Lift that off again. This section is all going to be catching the light. Go up to the edge of the moss. Again, this section is going to be catching the light as well. Do a bit more work on this crevice here. So this bit's all going to be dark. Right, now that's starting to look quite a bit more three-dimensional. Just touching in. So what you want to do is you want to step back from it, have a look, see if there's any bits you want to accentuate. So I don't think I've done enough down here. This bit needs to be dark. Around the far side of the whirl. Little bit there. Right, now the next step is to add more of a dark colour, and I'm going to use one of the darkest colours that I've got in my box, which is the 90% warm grey. Now you want this one with a pretty sharp point because you're actually going to be working more on the grooves, and what you're trying to pick out here is the darkest bit that's going to be at the centre of the grooves. So you don't have to do it to all the grooves, because some are going to be darker than others, but you just want to work through. Let's start over here actually. So what should be happening if you're using a sharp point for this, you should have a bit more of area of the previous brown you used with the dark shade, then just accentuating the centre of it. And you don't have to do it for everyone, as I've said, just for some of them. And what you can also do is in the very darkest parts of the tree, you can also do some shading with this pencil. So this is going to be one of the darkest parts because it's the furthest away from the moonlight. Just try and keep it, perhaps bring it up between some of these . accentuate the roughness here. There, this bit's going to be in the shade. This part of the whirl. Accentuate these round bits. There we go. And you can bring the darkest parts up further like that. You can see that's really starting to look three-dimensional now. So we'll carry it on down here. I think I'm going to leave a bit more of a highlight there, so we can just lift a bit off with the rubber. Fill in that darkest part. Carry on up here, so again that bit's going to be, this bit's probably not going to be quite as dark. Just put in a little bit, accentuate the middle of the whorls. Shade in this big crevice here, so we've got even more depth. So I think what I'm going to do up here, where it's a little bit lighter, I am going to use the 70%. Although I'm not shading the whole thing, I'm just actually going to use the lighter shade, the 70% French grey, just to widen out some of these crevices, just to try and incorporate a little bit more texture without making it too dark. There, do the same down here. So I'm just following the lines again, but going over them a little bit, just to darken the wood up. So now that we've got that part of the bark coloured, to introduce a little bit more texture, I'm just going to take a warmer colour. This is the Sienna brown. I'm just going to put in a few streaks of that, just very subtly. You won't see very much of it, but it just breaks the colours up and adds a little bit more texture. Just put it on fairly randomly, quite well spread out over your tree. A bit down there. You can hardly see it, but it does have the effect of giving more of a texture. Put a bit up here. Now for the broken parts, because they're the inside of the tree, they're going to be a lot lighter. So I'm going to go back with the 20% French grey. And then the jagged parts, I'm going to use the 70% French grey for those. So I'm using quite a sharp point here. I want to keep these light, these bits of bark, so I don't want my darker brown colour to spread out too much. So the last thing we need to do is the moss. So I take a medium shade of wood, green, Kelly green, and I go into the moss and I just make very round bobbly movements like this, because that gives you the texture of the moss, almost like little dots. But you want to leave some of the lighter green showing through, probably in the middle with this one, because that makes it look more three-dimensional. You want to get the moss merged into the bark. You can even take the colour over into the bark. Put a bit more of the dark green on this side. Then do the same thing up here. Put a bit more in here. Right, I'm now going to work on the moss with a darker green. I'm actually using an olive green shade because I found that the dark green pencil was a little bit too bright in colour to fit with moss. So again, I'm going in, spots and scribbles. And then just to blend in the edges, give a little bit of a three-dimensional feel, I'm going to go just around the edges, and in the darker areas I'm going in with the 90% warm grey. Now I'm just putting a little bit more of the brightest tone, the lightest colour here. So that's the bit that's going to be really catching the light. Okay, so that's the moss done. Now I'm going to review the drawing again and have a look to see if I need to enhance anything. Now, looking at it, to me, it's still not looking quite three-dimensional enough, and it's not, you know, coming out from the page well enough. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to get my 90% French grey, and I'm going to put in a bit more colour. I'm going to darken the whole of this branch. It's still all looking a bit too light for me. So I've darkened that up. Now I'm going back in with the 90% warm grey, bringing the shading further up, deepening that shadow. And then just to really make it pop, I'm going to put in some black as well. So I'm going to do the darkest shading in black. Then I'm going to go back round some of these lines because I've lost them a bit in the shading. I'm actually going to put in a few more lines as well. Here we go. And perhaps just lift a little bit of the pigment off some of these unevennesses. Shade around the whirl a bit more. Then accentuate some of these lines down here as well. Put them in black. Now we've lost the warm highlights that we put in here, so I'm going to go back in, add in a bit of the Sienna. There we go, and I'm just going to do the same thing for a bit of this other bark here. Just put in a bit more dark. Just around here, a bit more down here. This is the warm grey again. And then the last thing you can do to give it a bit more texture is if you sharpen your warm grey pencil, you can just go in and add a few little scribbly marks like this to bring in a bit more roughness. And a final touch, I just think the bottom of this whirl needs to be a little bit darker. There we go, how to colour bark in coloured pencils.
Hello again, Honey here. I hope you enjoyed following along with this tutorial. I certainly learnt a lot and can't wait to apply it to my colouring. Don't forget you can get your hands on the Wildwood Witches issue, which was featured in this video, via the link in our description. Make sure to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell, and we'll see you next week for our speed colour video. Bye!